The 2000s were a pretty interesting decade. MySpace, Blockbusters, flip phones, iPods, Razor scooters. Out of all of the trends from 20-ish years ago, though, there's one that I want to focus on in particular, and that's parkour. If you grew up in the late 2000s, parkour, or free running if you want to get fancy, was the coolest thing around. It was flashy, stylish, and you could pull it off pretty much anywhere, which made it a pretty appealing concept to a lot of people. And it wasn't just us, the dumb, impressionable youth that found this fairly new sport captivating. Pretty soon, game designers realized that it would make for some pretty sweet gameplay. And we got some absolute bangers out of it. Prince of Persia, Infamous, Assassin's Creed. This subculture of the 2000s dominated video games for a while. While these games are all great in their own right, I never really got into them other than Infamous in recent years, which is another game that I could go on and on about, but we'll save that one for another video. However, there was one game that stood out to me above all the rest. A game that, since discovering it, I've played time and time again, and one that I think accomplishes parkour the best. I love Mirror's Edge. Everything about it is just so cool. The music, the action, the sleek city skylines, the rush of leaping from building to building, and the feeling of freedom that comes with it. It's such a unique, one-of-a-kind game that, in my opinion, hasn't really been replicated yet. And it really should be. My history with this game dates back to the spring of 2013. Nearly 5 years after the game's initial release, and just about 13 years ago from now. It was a crisp Sunday afternoon in the middle of spring, and I was out with my family. Like often back then, we stopped in GameStop on the way home to look around for a bit. As I scanned the shelves of cases upon cases, each box art competing with one another for my attention, one game in particular caught my eye. Here, among all of the conventional, gritty games at the time, was this bright and vibrant case, divergent from the rest. I had heard of this game before, and I knew just enough about it that I was interested in giving it a try. So, I decided to pick it up, and the rest is history. A quick Dairy Queen trip, and one awkward vine later, I was home. My anticipation was at an all-time high. You know how it is when you pick up a new game as a kid, staring at the box art and flipping through the manual during the car ride back. Regardless, that didn't matter now. It was finally time to try out my new game. And when I did, it really clicked with me. I played through it over the course of a month or so, which, while kind of long for a game like this, was still kind of a big deal because it was unprecedented for me to finish games back then. I was hooked. And ever since then, I've been coming back to replay Mirror's Edge from time to time. It's even become a sort of tradition in recent years to replay it every spring around this same time of year. It's just that good. While Mirror's Edge certainly wasn't the first game to implement parkour, it was, to my knowledge, the first game to have it as the entire focus. That means that in order for the game to succeed, the developers at DICE had to get the movement in the game right. And man, did they ever. Despite being a closed course game, Mirror's Edge never really felt this way. The levels are open enough to allow freedom of choice in which paths you can take, and the movement is so fluid that it feels freeing, even in the confines of a more linear level structure. The controls are intuitive and pretty easy to get a hang of, and before long, you'll be flying over, under, and around obstacles throughout each of the game's main 9 chapters. It's a feeling that not a lot of other games have ever really come close to, though there are a few pretty decent contenders out there. The gameplay also lends itself really well to speedrunning, which is something the developers clearly thought of, as once you beat the game for the first time, you'll unlock a dedicated mode just for that. Another thing I should mention real quick is the combat. Sure, you can just run up to enemies and take them head on, but you're not going to get very far. Besides, where's the fun in that? An elaborate parkour system means an elaborate combat system, and it's always a ton of fun to come in flying, taking out enemies through wall runs, springboards, or whatever other creative means you can think of. Of course, this was a 2008 game, so that also means guns. I'm gonna be honest though, I always found that these slowed down the gameplay a little bit, and I think DICE had the right idea scrapping them in Catalyst. And this is all just surface level. Like any game with a dedicated enough fanbase, there are people out there who are committed to pushing this game's mechanics to its absolute limits. Mirror's Edge has such a crazy intricate system, and if you know what you're doing, you can pull off some pretty sick skips and reach some crazy top speeds. I've never been able to do it, mostly because I play on console, but it's still really fun to see what other people are able to accomplish in this nearly 2-decade-old game. Of course, it's always worth taking a slower approach from time to time as well. That way, you can soak in everything that the breathtaking world of this game has to offer. Set in an unnamed, near-futuristic city, the world of Mirror's Edge almost seems like a perfect utopia at first glance. Colossal gleaming buildings, bright blue skies, and things are actually clean? Okay, now I know this is a work of fiction. Something still feels off though. Despite the bustling city directly below you, things still feel somewhat isolated and lonely. That's because beneath the surface of the pure glossy whites and the stark bright reds of the city lies something much more sinister. Something that the average citizen would have to keep an eye out for to uncover. Mirror's Edge tells a story of government and corporate corruption, and the game's world reflects this brilliantly. Hiding behind the facade of a pure, perfect utopia is the truth. And you'll find hints of it in the forms of graffiti, hidden dead drops, and even some off-putting, propagandistic news articles spread throughout the game. It's something that's somewhat easy to miss if you're just rushing through the game, and I think that reflects the state of the inhabitants of this metropolis so well. If you aren't paying attention, things seem perfectly fine on a surface level. It's only once you start to question and look into things that you'll discover what's really going on here. Of course, the story of the game flat out tells you this. It has to. But even if it didn't, the environmental storytelling does an excellent job at nudging you towards making that conclusion all on your own. Speaking of the city and its bright, distracting colors, another thing I have to talk about is the vibe of this game, because it's got one like no other. If you were around in the mid to late 2000s, you'll know that every game looked the same. And okay, sure, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration that people online have been parroting over the years, but there's still some semblance of truth to it because back then, almost every AAA game had that same look. Dull, desaturated browns and grays. I'm still not sure if this was because of technological constraints at the time with HD TVs just breaking into the scene, or if it was done in an effort to make games look more realistic to appeal to more mature gamers. Either way, it definitely took over a good chunk of the industry by storm for a while. That's exactly why Mirror's Edge stood out so much for the time. There, in an absolute sea of muddy brown waters, was this bright, vivid red and white beacon calling you ashore. The art direction of this game actually has a pretty interesting history, because believe it or not, it was gonna be another one of those dark, gritty brown games. The only reason that this didn't happen was because the designers found that moving so fast through this environment that they built would cause motion sickness, likely due to too much detail. And nobody wants to be throwing up while playing video games. Things were reworked, and eventually the iconic style that we know and love came to be. To me, the art style of Mirror's Edge is a huge part of what makes the game so special. For one, it wound up being pretty timeless. Compare a screenshot of Mirror's Edge to any other game that released back then, and you'll immediately see what I mean. The decision to utilize baked-in lighting also helped this game's style tremendously, and it's kind of insane how well it aged. I mean, seriously, I came across a screenshot someone took in-game the other day, and I thought it was a real photo at first. Honestly, I wish we would stop focusing on real-time lighting so much, because it kind of feels like a bit of the magic was lost along the way. When you've got a team of dedicated artists who truly care about how a game looks, things turn out incredibly nicely. Not only does the art style make for a pretty looking game though, but it also works into the aforementioned story and world building greatly as well. Everything is so clean, sleek, and a little too perfect on the surface, which really helps sell that uncanny feeling. And it also makes those few areas that are dingy all that more impactful. Mirror's Edge has an art style that works to its advantage in more ways than one. And honestly, if it were any different, I don't think this game would have had as much of an impact as it did. There's more to the vibe of Mirror's Edge than just the visuals though. Music is another factor that plays a pretty substantial role in the identity of a lot of games. And this game is no different. The soundtrack of Mirror's Edge is futuristic, unique, and at times even a bit mysterious, with a wide variety of songs ranging from calming to fast and punchy to wondrous and astonishing. Each one has a role to play, and they all work really well into the campaign of the game. Of course, I can't talk about the music in Mirror's Edge without bringing up one of the best original songs made for a game, Still Alive. And no, not the Portal one, though that one is pretty good too. This song has always been one of my favorites when it comes to original music in games. Back in elementary school, I was the guy who listened to video game music exclusively. So hearing this song that was from a game I liked and had lyrics, it was eye-opening at the time. Like most music from various media of the past, it's become so nostalgic to me over the years, and listening to it again brings me right back to those warm spring afternoons of 2013. Aside from my clear bias though, the song also ties into the game so well. When you take a moment to really listen to the lyrics, you'll know how well they parallel the protagonist, Faith, and the game story itself. Waiting on change, perseverance, fighting for what's right. These are all subjects discussed in the song, and ones that are ever so present throughout the entire game's story as well. It's a theme that encapsulates the morals of Mirror's Edge so incredibly well, and I couldn't think of a more perfect song to represent the game. Mirror's Edge was such a unique standout from the types of generic games that were out there on the market at the time. And it's kind of baffling to me that it was made by EA of all people. Although I guess that's just a testament to the incredibly talented staff that worked there at the time. It's a perfect example of how going off the beaten path can really make for something completely new and interesting. Which is pretty fitting, considering the game is about defying the status quo. I really respect the game's developers so much for trying something completely new in more ways than one. To me, Mirror's Edge is a perfect representation of freedom, creativity, and originality in the gaming scene. Sure, maybe it didn't sell as well as EA would have hoped, but it still tried something new, and that counts for something. It's a real one-of-a-kind game that's gained quite a decent cult following over the years, years, with new successors popping up here and there within recent times. Although the franchise might be dormant in the eyes of its publisher, to us, the fans, the spirit of Mirror's Edge is absolutely still alive.
Mirror's Edge is fun, even though I never played it. And this is a 6-7 rule. I don't even care. I don't know how many seconds. Goodbye.